No, it wasn't pretty, but that doesn't really matter. It's Houston managed to pull off a big win against Kansas State before heading into a gauntlet of Big 12 play.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs. Thank you for making us first listen of the day. A podcast all about the Houston Cougars. Thank you for making us first listen of the post-game, first listen this morning, first listen anywhere in between. I'm host Parker Ainsworth, and I cannot wait to break this one down for you. It was not pretty. That sometimes makes for the best conversation, but Houston wins 78-64. Gonna be a little short, gonna be a little sweet, but I do want to get in and out of the few thoughts I had. Houston, again, 70-64, double-digit win, was at home. Looks like a pretty good crowd. All those things I think went Houston's way. Kansas State is not a strong basketball team. Let's not beat around the bush. They were 1-10 in Big 12 play coming into this. We heard from Christian earlier this week about how, honestly, they were hoping to just keep a close game. And it looked like earlier on that was going to go their way. And frankly, they had a really strong, I'd say, first half. And we'll get into more of that in a second. I think the thing people take away from this game, though, was how ugly it got for Houston. So I want to talk about that, talk about the gauntlet coming up, and all the things in between. So this win was really weird. Houston had 15 turnovers. That's very uncharacteristically high for them. They did turn Kansas State over 17 times. They just don't typically have games that are that close in total turnovers, and certainly don't have any games where Houston turns the ball over that many times. There are some very freshman mistakes. They went like a Kingston Flemings pass. They got picked off, just like pick six picked off at one point, or different Cenac moments too, and kind of same kind of moments. Isiah Harwell had his own fair share. It just didn't quite feel like crisp, clean Houston Cougar offense. Houston's known for having low possessions and maximizing those possessions, the offensive rebounds and low turnovers, right? And while they did a decent job on the offensive glass with 12 of them in this game, especially when you consider that Houston shot the ball after the bad start pretty well, it wasn't the cleanest game in terms of turning the basketball over. Also worth pointing out that Houston had 18 assists, so they were trying to move the ball a lot. I think that's fairly obvious, but it just wasn't always getting into their own team's hands. It did not help that Kansas State's offense was almost completely reliant on those turnovers. Are there 64 points? Kansas State had 26 points off of turnovers, and 20 of those came in some form of a fast break. That's a lot of their points coming off of Houston mistakes. So you're like, why was this game so close? Houston shooting themselves in the foot feels like a fair reason there. Now, other things I think I need to point out here. Houston scored the ball very poorly to start. I believe at one point the score is 15-9. Houston then in the latter part of the second half won a 27-4 run in the final 11 minutes of that first half to ultimately take a 33-19 lead and kind of sat at that 10-15 mark for most of the second half once things even out to there. Ultimately won the game by 14. That opening stretch, though, I actually thought they probably got better shots as far as shot selection goes than later. They just couldn't buy a basket. They got Emanuel Sharp going, I guess, a little bit. They ran an interesting first set for him. We see Houston typically open up again the post involved. In this game, they open up again the post to the high post, the 15-foot area, and dropping a backdoor cut to Emanuel for an and one almost dunk. And that was their only points on the board for a long time. And so Emanuel does chime in with 33 total points at the time this thing is over. Fouls out later, might have had a few more on there as well. Good to see him get going. Uzan and Flemings both had 12. Those 12 did feel very differently. I feel like Kingston Fleming struggled early in this one. He had some of those freshman turnovers we mentioned. He had a guy that does not have very many turnovers per game this season. I think it's like less than 1.5. He had 4 turnovers in this game. Miles Uzan, however, felt like he kind of chose his spots more often than not. He had 12 points, 2 of 5 from behind the arc. And this one, Cenac was also 2 of 3 from behind the arc. Thought his pop play was interesting. Went well. I thought his defense was strong, but he didn't have the rebounds we're used to seeing him get. Instead, those seemed to go to Khalifa Sacco. And for all that, we're going to talk about other guys that did not have strong games in this one. I feel like Sacco played well enough to we need to make sure we give him a special shout out here. Khalif had we'll call it a hectic week, a hellacious week. Lost his grandfather during the week, missed a day of practice to go, kind of take some time to himself. He ultimately came back, practiced on Friday. I think it might have been a little bit lighter practice for him coming out and playing today. I thought played very, very well. 6 points and 6 rebounds. That doesn't feel like it tells the whole story. Anything about the way he defended the rim. Sort of Tugler being out and foul trouble early in that one. And then Sacco ultimately was playing so well that they left him in for stretches that I don't know that they would have had he never gotten in the game with the Tugler foul trouble. I thought, for what's worth, Sacco also played very well in both games on the road trip through Utah, BYU and Utah, that is. And so I think this may be building on something for him. As Daniel chimes in here, though, that it might have been the best we've seen him play from a defensive standpoint, cutting off the drives, playing. They call it at the line of scrimmage. They move the ball around and stuff like that. And really, really impressive performance there. Isiah Harwell chimed in too. He had 19 minutes, just 3 points, just one field goal, and a free throw. I am waiting to get back to that. We saw him get hot shooting at the end of non-conference play. He had a great shooting game against Baylor. If we can get that guy back, I think he'll be a complete player. He's still doing so many of this gritty hustle play kind of stuff that's going to always get him action. I think he's going to continue to be involved, but ultimately his hustle play in a game where Houston's having trouble scoring the basketball was more than enough. Meanwhile, like Mercy Miller, I guess, had 4 points in 9 minutes, but as a bench sub, his job was kind of until he scored the basketball, and he was having trouble finding it. McCarty came in and did some things as well, had 4 points on 2 shots. But he's not exactly a dominant scorer. And so we were looking for someone to take over that offense. And it was Emanuel while he was in. It just his own foul trouble kind of limited him some there. And I actually felt like their best shot selection might have been the first 10 minutes of the game when shots just weren't falling. And then they kind of got away from that. But as they were able to turn Kansas State over, they got into the break and got more of those transition-y kinds of baskets. As far as Houston turning the ball over, they're on their own. It felt like when they got away from that kind of set offense that was creating shots they did not make early, then they got kind of stuck with, well, if that's not going to work, I'm going to try this. I'm going to gamble here. I'm going to take that chance there. And that wasn't really working. Ultimately, I'm not going to be upset about this. And I said during the week, other programs I'd have been worried about today being a trappish feeling game because of the big games ahead of Houston on this schedule. Iowa State Monday, Arizona next weekend, and then Kansas the following Monday night. That's an incredibly tough 10-day stretch coming up for the Coogs. I guess 10 days starting now. And really, other programs would be looking ahead and just drop and lay an egg today. If this is the air quote egg that Houston's going to drop right now, being that they have 3 freshmen and a redshirt freshman in their 8-man rotation, I think they'll live with that. A 14-point win being your egg of sorts isn't so great. Refs were not great today either. I thought they got a little bit emotional. They hit Sacco up with a tee after a dunk that I mentioned on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I really did not think that was the appropriate place to try and damper the emotions of the game there. Obviously, the refs aren't supposed to know about Sacco's crazy week or whatever, maybe not necessarily when making a call, but it was very much an emotional, I just had a powerful dunk in a big moment as a college basketball player kind of play. To the refs' credit, not that they deserve it, but to the refs' credit, they did ultimately hit Kansas State with a very similar tech later. So, I guess bygones be bygones there. Tang got one as well. Felt like the refs did not want an emotionally high game, did not want a very physical game, and that's always going to hurt Houston. Now, I want to talk some in the second segment about transitioning from this game into that gauntlet that Houston's got going on, kind of where those things are heading as we quickly wrapping it out of this one. But before we get that, today's show is brought to you by everybody's over at FanDuel, because the Winter Olympics are officially here. Also on Peacock. If you watch that game on Peacock, the Winter Olympics are on Peacock. Anything like us, you're locking in for the events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel, it just makes more sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about the most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. Drama of curling matches, high-speed hockey, figure skating, big jumps in the skis and things like that. The Winter Games are on. There's no better place to get in and follow the action than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Parker Ainsworth locked on Coogs here, and Houston does manage to knock off Kansas State 78-64. I'm a little bit under the weather here, but I do want to talk about this game, some transition this game into the rest of this gauntlet they've got the next 10 days. We mentioned they play a top 5 team in America on Monday night. That team might be number 2 or 3 by the time they play after their big win today in Iowa State. They play a number 1 team in America, at least they were last I saw, next Saturday in Arizona at home, and they head off to play Kansas. Oh, those Kansas Jayhawks at the Fog Allen a week from Monday. So it's a big 10-day stretch, and really will be kind of an interesting test. We'd likened this 4-game window starting with Kansas State to a few from playing in the tournament. You go Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final 4 title game, right? You could see playing a Power 4 team down their luck that maybe has a hot run like Kansas State. They played you tough. That feels Sweet 16 like. You could see playing a top tier team in America, one of the 5 best teams in America, in the Elite 8 because it's the region matched up and whatever. That is Monday night. They're 2 days apart, just like that spread happens in the NCAA tournament. And you get a little bit of a break before next weekend. You play the number 1 team in America, in theory, in Arizona. That is, again, like a Final 4 caliber game, and I very well see both teams, Arizona and Houston, being in the Final 4, frankly. Then the Monday night after that, 2 days later, you go from Saturday to Monday, just like you saw last year in the national championship game when Houston went from Saturday to Monday, the same kinds of transition. That practice run, dress rehearsal, so to speak, feels very much like a good way to prepare and see how things go. I expect Houston to lose a game in the next 10 days. I don't know which to tell you. I have a crossover we're doing for Monday about Houston, Iowa State. I'm sure Nick will tell me about how it will be that one. I'm sure I'm going to cross over with Leaf. We've been scheduling it for later this week about Houston, Arizona next weekend. I'm sure he's going to tell me about how it's going to be that one. And when I talk to Derek, who I love over Locked on Jayhawks, I'm sure he's going to tell me how it's going to be that one. Whatever the case may be, I think there'll be one of them. For a gambler, I'd probably put it as one of the road games, but I bet there'll be one of them that Houston drops in the next 10 days. And this was absolutely one in Kansas State today that because of that, you could not drop, right? And so Houston opened up with a sluggish offense. They could not put the ball in the basket, even if they were finding good shots. And ultimately, it did not matter. Obviously, props to Khalifa Sacco for not just playing, but playing so well, given the adversity he got hit with this week. Props to Emanuel Sharp for finding a way to lift this team. We've mentioned throughout the season how we need to find ways to appreciate Emanuel and the contributions he's had to this program. Obviously, as the all-time leading three-point shooter, he's climbing up the ladder in all-time wins and all kinds of stuff, right? But shouts to him for it's not always vocal leadership. He's not a big, give one to the Gipper speech kind of guy or whatever metaphor you want to throw out there. But clearly today, when it was okay, time to go get some buckets, he put the team on his back, attacked the rim. He was weaving in and out of traffic to get to the rim, took contact at the rim. And in a weirdly called game, I'll say to be nice, he just did find his way to 9 free throw attempts. I think people need to continue to follow his lead in that way where he's like, hey, we're not hitting from the outside. I need to, again, if he's not hitting from the outside, he does this. Other guys need to kind of follow suit, I think, where he's attacking the rim and getting downhill on things. I say that like Houston shot the ball poorly from behind the arc. It was 33%. Just to make it efficient or worth it, still I see that number over 35, hopefully closer to 40. And like I said, after that first 10-minute stretch, Houston's offense actually got pretty strong. It just that first 10 minutes did happen and the scoring did not. I'll have more to break down on this one after I give my voice a rest. We'll also be crossing over with Nick Maravitz of Locked on Cyclones for Monday as well. Got a lot of content coming your way each and every day as we approach a stressful, intense week of Big 12 basketball. Locked on Coogs, primarily Locked on Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.